think one of the things I thought was really interesting about Jon Stewart's brilliant and actually rather funny and entertaining demonstration in Washington is that it could turn out to be a turning point in how politics is acted out as theater in America. Let's be quite frank about it. In the United States right now, only well, there's a lot of people are hurting or long-term unemployed, but you don't have the kind of deprivation or human suffering that you get in much of the emerging world. You don't have death squads. You don't have the kind of almost in slavery oppression. You don't have starvation. You have malnutrition of the homeless people. Significant, serious, probably if you ask an American doctor what are serious problems, obesity, diabetes is a bit of a problem, lack of exercise, depression, anomia, the problems of prosperity, of social function. So life does not raise up the kind of political demands that it did, say, 100 years ago. Also, the American system is very unwieldy and inefficient. It's very hard for the American political system to really do anything or be responsive. But that doesn't mean that politics, a lot of people take the fact that, well, you really can't change anything. Everybody's in the hand of the bankers, and they seem to think that politics doesn't matter, and that is not true. Politics always matters. And the thing is that what politics does is a kind of theater. You take a bunch of individuals who are racked by their own anxieties and uncertainties, and politics, like many cultural forms, works to try to create community by giving people a release from these types of anxieties in a sense of community. Probably the most classic way of doing that is the evangelical approach. And American political discourse has been dominated by the evangelical, the televangelist, the evangelical, from Martin Luther King's brilliant I Have a Dream speech to Glenn Beck lately, which is kind of pathetic, and everything in the extreme. In 1,000 years, if people were to dig up the speeches, the significant speeches of Ronald Reagan, they could be mistaken for believing he was a religious figure, because he doesn't talk that much about politics, and it would be hard to tell in a few thousand years if you lost context between the 700 Club and say the Republican Party. It would be fairly hard to tell which one was religious and which one was political. And I think even our own distinction's a bit arbitrary. What we've had so far this year has been so depressing is that these anxieties, particularly by a cluster group of people who are aging, white, males, they're not the people who are economically being impacted by the economy, who suddenly have claimed they've gotten really concerned about the deficit. I'm sure they would have jumped on about anything. I think the real thing is a concern about the changes that are happening in America. America is changing. It's becoming much more diverse, much more multiracial, much more multicultural society. Also, there are changes that are and these changes are being brought by the capitalist reforms that Reagan embraced. America is becoming more global, more multi-ethnic, more multicultural, because it's so embraced capitalism that the global economy is the capitalist. It's not part of socialism. If the socialist nation states had survived, socialist nation states are very isolationist. They put up trade tariffs. Their primary concern is to keep people working in their factory jobs rather than their efficiency. Capitalist systems go overseas. They seek new markets. They seek new opportunities. This globalization has created an enormous amount of anxiety and uncertainty for a lot of people. I think in America right now, the element on the top, not the richest, but the top middle class is actually has more to be anxious about, because the certainties of unionized factory work that they grew up with are disappearing, and they're moving into an IT information globalized economy, and the following political powers. These causing anxiety, and when people have anxiety, they look to culture as means to release. Sometimes they look to art. You very often will get groups of people who give up on politics and seek release in religion and art and other forms of cultural practice. Politics is one of these kinds of cultural practices, though. What you've seen in Glenn Beck and such is that this anxiety is, Glenn Beck's statement is, in your creation of yourself as a person, in your overcoming anxiety, you identify with these images. Basically, George Washington seems to be the Oedipal father that they've latched onto. And this rage is given a particular expression. You identify with this completely imagined reality that is so generations before any living memory, so you can fill whatever you want with these hallucinations about the founding fathers and the beginning of the Constitution. These people are not historical scholars. They don't really know what life in 1791 was like, what George Washington's domestic policies really were. And that's what's been going on. What Jon Stewart suddenly came, what I saw the other day, is he brought something completely different. He brought sort of the comedy show. He took a lot of cultural elements together and created something that was a lot of fun, and a lot of people really, really enjoyed it. And what people told me that I'm hearing, and what I felt by seeing it, and what I think millions of other people in America, and more importantly maybe millions of other people in the other world, who are becoming scared again about America, like they were scared when Bush was around, is that it is possible to create a political theater, okay, that isn't going to be this confrontational. America is not doomed to the partisan that we saw under Clinton, the partisanism that we've been seeing for the past 20 years. That this isn't a destiny. This isn't just the fate. That it is possible to also use good-natured humor, to use humor to resolve issues of anxiety, to use parody to resolve issues of anxiety, to play practical jokes, to have music as elements to anxiety. That it doesn't just have to be either apocalyptic, end-of-the-world evangelicalism. It doesn't have to be completely aberrational. It is possible to use a new theater of politics to actually create a political expression that, even though there will be differences in voting in different areas, and people will vote one way or people will vote another, but that it won't result in the fact is what you have in America right now, and you've had for a while. And that's, quite frankly, that Republicans can't marry Democrats. People in the same family who are different political opinions really can't talk to each other. People can't be friends with members of other political parties. If people are members of other political parties at work, if they want to work together, they have to get some kind of resolution. This is strange. You don't really see this in where I'm living right now in London. You don't really see this. I mean, people of different political persuasions, can live together, can work together, people move. But this partisanness, and we may have seen here an expression by Jon Stewart and the whole team at Comedy Central of creating a new way of producing political theater which overcomes that. And I certainly hope so, because the key element of politics in the American system is building some kind of consensus, and the key point of democracy isn't as much registering the people's opinion as creating the people together with their differences. You never get a unanimous decision in a democracy, so the number one thing a democracy can do is it can build a sense of common people, and we're really losing that in fragmented media and fragmented in identities. And to be able to have somebody to create a modern expression in the media which is tolerant of different points of view or different perspectives is a very promising sign. Jon Stewart took a big risk on this. He didn't have to do it. He could have flopped on his face. I think he steps out of this the real winner of the 2010 election. And I think he will be a very, very influential figure in American politics going forward. If he wanted to run for Senate, he probably could, but I would imagine he probably wants to stay where the real power is, and that's obviously Comedy Central.